How's it going, film and TV fans? Welcome back to another review on the Off the Cuff Film Reviews YouTube channel, and today we are looking at something that has been a long time coming. Today we are looking at Doctor Who Series 13 Flux, otherwise known as Doctor Who Flux, the majority of people. The 13th series of Doctor Who premiered on October 31st, 2021 with the episode The Halloween Apocalypse. The first time, actually, I believe, in the series' history where they've had a Halloween special, as it technically is Halloween special, if you catch my cold. However, this series was filmed, created, produced, directed, scored, all that stuff during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. As Series 12 was Series 12 was produced just before COVID came in and released in very early 2020, so it was all shot in 2019 basically. So that series was fine really, but it's Series 13 where there's been issues. There was obviously issues with COVID, so it's reduced from the 10 episode series to a 6 episode series. But it's one overarching story instead of 10 different stories, or it all depends on. Instead of it being 10 different stories, it is six chapters of one story. Yeah, it's a series for me that's a bit messy, but before we jump into it, we're going to talk about, we're going to go through the episodes. So we've got Episode 1, Halloween Apocalypse, Episode 2, War of the Sontarans, Chapter 1, The Halloween Apocalypse, Chapter 2, The War of the Sontarans, Chapter 3, Once Upon Time, Chapter 4, Village of the Angels, Chapter 5, Survivors of the Flux, Chapter 6, The Vanquishers. And that brings us to the end. There is, of course, the 3 Series 13 specials, Eve of the Daleks, Legend of the Sea Devils, and The Power of the Doctor, but they will be in their own video, as at least 2 of them are worth talking about, for the most part, as they have positive to them. I'm not going to tell you which one isn't very good, but I think you could probably guess, considering that out of the 2, one of the ones that is, out of the 3, one of the shit ones is released. And the other 2 are pretty good. So, I think you can grab the concept of going with that one. Obviously, Eve of the Daleks was the New Year's Eve 2022 special. And Legend of the Sea Devils was our mid-2022 special. And then we've obviously got the finale for the 13th Doctor, the Centenary special, as it's been known for a while. But now we're given the full title of The Power of the Doctor, coming on October 23rd. So I can't wait to talk about those 3 specials. But for now, we're talking about these 6 episodes of Series 13. Halloween Apocalypse, War of the Sontarans, Once Upon Time, Village of the Angels, Survivors of the Flux, and the finale, The Vanquishers. Now, with the Halloween Apocalypse, it sets up Carvanista, Dan, The Flux, Vinda, Swarm, Azure, Diane. Continues to show off Yaz and the Doctor's relationship, so it sets up a lot already, and even the rest of the episodes going forward all set stuff up. And a lot of people are saying, well, it'll all be resolved by the end, which wasn't true. It's a messy series, I won't lie, and it's obviously not its fault because of the conditions and the limited amount of things they can do with the series. Obviously, part of it is unfortunately to blame for Chibnall for not being able to write a cohesive 6-episode story and cramming too much shit in that doesn't go very far. And it's nice to see the Sontarans back, the first time they've been seen since at least series 10, not 10, maybe 8 or 9, and even then they haven't actually been seen as like proper Sontarans since series 4, so and they have had a design change. They have had a complete design change to look a lot more like classic Who than they do nowadays, and I think that I don't really like the new Sontaran design, but it is what it is. And it's also nice to see the Weeping Angels back as well. That's quite fun. But other than that, obviously with this series you've got to have so much. You have to do the things that each episode of a standard series would do, like historicals and stuff like that, and try and make it attached to one story. So I will give him some credit. It's a difficult job, but it manages to put itself off decently enough for it to just get a pass. But there are still some elements to it that are weak. Now, I will point out that while this series was airing last year, I was lucky enough to be able to attend London Film and TV Comic-Con last year, where Sacha Dhawan and Joe Martin were present, and I watched a panel with them. Obviously, Sacha Dhawan isn't in this series at all. The Master's not present in any way, shape or form, although he will be in the Power of the Doctor. But Joe Martin is in this series, so it was interesting. Questions were asked about what either of them would be in this series, and obviously they couldn't answer it. So, but it's just worth pointing out that I did get to not meet them up close and personal, but I did get to see them, so that's fun. But the Halloween Apocalypse is a bit of an interesting episode because, like I said, it sets up so much, and it does it so quickly and so quietly as well. I think Dan is a character that I actually quite like. I think I do prefer him. I mean, it's kind of 50-50 between him and Graham. They're both really likeable characters, but at the same time, they're both supposed to serve the same purpose, really, which is going to be weird when Graham and Ryan turn up in the Centenary Special, because they are, that's a fact. It's interesting to think that the 13th Doctor becomes one of the only Doctors to actually keep, you know, one companion from her very first episode to her very last episode, that being Yaz, you know. It's interesting to think that, because while the other two left at the end of Resolution of the Daleks, it is interesting to think that Yaz has been there from the beginning and will continue to be there. And obviously there is the whole exploration of their relationship, which in my opinion was handled terribly, because it was teased to or alluded to towards the very end of this series, and then in the Eve of the Dalek special it sort of just dropped on us like a bomb, like, are they gonna kiss, sort of stuff. Like, it needed more time, with 3 episodes left after that, and they did nothing to continue it in Legend of the Sea Devils. I'm really concerned as to where that's going to go in the final. I know that it's an hour and a half, so there's a lot to do, but the point is, it was not very well established at all. But the Halloween Apocalypse is it's a decent episode. I think the start where they're with the grab bar and stuff, I don't like that bit at all. For me, it just something feels a bit off about it, really. Personally, that's just a personal preference. I do quite like the Swarm's regeneration or revitalization. That's a nice scene, and I like that he sort of speaks directly to the camera, to the Doctor, which is cool. But it's an episode for me that it's not exactly the best start per se. I mean, it's a decent enough start, and by the end you feel a bit like the cliffhanger is the end of the universe, kind of. That's just not true, let's be real. And yeah, this has been Halloween Apocalypse. Stay tuned for my review of War of the Sontarans. Right, so War of the Sontarans. It's historical, but it's obviously, instead of it's obviously in the Crimean War with Mary Seacole, but instead of it being the Russians, it's the Sontarans. You know what? It's a pretty decent episode, I won't lie. It's got that same kind of army general who ignores the Doctor, gets his entire fucking army game ended, then asks the Doctor for help kind of thing that happens a few times across this entire television series. But, you know, it doesn't do much for me personally. It's not one of my more favourite episodes of this series, but it does introduce a few things, including the Maury and the priest thingy, as well as also continuing the story of Mr. Liverpoolian 1820 Builderman, whose name I don't fucking know. But listen, it's a pretty decent episode. It continues the story nicely. It looks pretty. It sounds really good, because Akinola's music here is fucking incredible. And it's a pretty good episode. I like that the Doctor has to promise Yaz that she'll save him, and I also really, really like the chemistry between Carvanista and Dan. That's one of my favourite things about Flux as a whole. And my favourite, you know, things about Carvanista being one of my favourite characters is because his chemistry with most of the other characters, but specifically Dan, is amazing. And he is probably the best written character in this entire series. That will play a part as we get a bit later on in this series, but it's, like I said, it's a series I continue to just think about a lot, really, as it's difficult to pinpoint, really, how I feel about it. But War of the Sontarans is a pretty decent episode. It's a pretty fun episode. Mary Seacole is a really well thought through character here, and she works quite well. Obviously, I know saying that it sounds stupid because that's her, like, time period and stuff, but what I'm saying, they managed to integrate her into the story very well. And the Doctor has a few of her speeches in this episode, and Vinda has a bit more to do here as well, which is quite interesting. Yeah, it's It's a pretty good episode, but it's definitely not the best the Flux has to offer. I think Village of the Angels is the best episode of Flux, but I am getting ahead of myself right fucking now. So, yeah, there is, again, it's one of those episodes where there is not too much to say because it's not exactly the greatest. So I'm going to move swiftly on to the next episode, which is, drumroll please, Once Upon Time. Right, so Once Upon Time. Now this is, I think, is where the series starts getting a bit fucking confusing. For the most part, I won't lie. It's a bit messy. It's all over the place. So much happens and so little happens as well. It's really quite messy because you've got the Maury stuff, you've got stuff where they go back in time, then there's the stuff where you see the fugitive doctor, which adds another fucking 4,000 things to the belt. Then you fucking introduce Belle, which is the most unnecessary character story arc in this entire fucking thing. And in all honesty, the further I watch this series, the more it pisses me off, because there's so much going on and it sets so much stuff up that it doesn't resolve in any way, shape or form, and it's just wasting everyone's time, in all honesty. But it still feels like Doctor Who, and I think it still has those moments. And Carvanister is, for the very limited time he's in this episode, is cool. The other thing this episode sets up that I actually quite like as well is the Grand Serpent and his all shtick, which I think the Grand Serpent is one of the other things that's quite one of the better things about this series. As it goes on, it gets better. Here it's the start of Grand Serpent, so it's a bit boring, but the rest of him and the rest of the times he appears in this season is actually really quite good, and I really hope the Grand Serpent does pop up again at some point in the future. Swarm and Azure are just really boring. I think Swarm has feels more like he's flexible and can be like funny at moments, whereas Azure is just flat as fuck in terms of her like personality. Is boring as hell. But I think Swarm has some elements to him that are quite funny, and he feels like the character they worked more on, which is what I can really appreciate. However, again, it's still jam-packed full of fucking bullshit. I cannot tell you the amount of times these episodes where we cut between something happened between the Doctor and then it just goes off to Belle doing something, and it's just like, it's not fucking needed. Get the fuck rid of it now, or I will end all of you, you know? Not that far, but it's just really unnecessary, and I don't like it at all, and I really, really just don't rate it at all. And I think this is the episode that starts to get me really pissed off with the series, with Flux, with all as a whole. And there isn't much more to say because it is just pathetic. It is the whole time stream jumping thing, and then this is the episode where, although it's not said here, but we find out later on that she sees Tecteun for the first time since she was mentioned in the Timeless Children. Yeah, it's starting to feel... And then the whole thing where you've got the Doctor and Vinda and Yaz and Dan at Astropos, but they're not actually Yaz and Vinda and that lot. They're actually, one of them's Carvanister, and they're the, whatever race he is. I can't fucking remember because it was so long ago it was mentioned, I actually don't fucking know. The Lupari, that's it. Yeah, she jumps into the time stream and doing something really stupid, which is not sensible, and it really is fucking annoying because I've liked 13 so far. I'm a defender saying that most of it... I'm not defender is the word, but I'm someone who's enjoyed this era of Doctor Who as the era of Doctor Who that I have watched all of it all the way through and have not missed a single episode, unlike the Capaldi era where I missed a few. While I do have more personal nostalgia towards 8 and 9, series 8 and 9, I still love this era of Doctor Who, and it still has had some brilliant episodes. Rosa is an incredible episode. What a powerful episode. The Nikola Tesla one from series 12, fantastic. Fugitive of the Jadoon is still a really good episode. You know, Spyfall part 1 and 2 are really good episodes. You know, And I do like the first episode, The Woman Who Fell to Earth. That feels like a lot of fun, and it feels different. And I like series 11 and 12 and 13. I do like all of it, but it is really hard to continue to enjoy this show when it throws so much new stuff at you every single episode, and it barely ties any of it up by the end. Obviously, we're still early on, but as someone who's watched this series before, it's really hard to give a shit, if you know what I mean. The passengers are just bullshit. Honestly, the passengers are bullshit. It's nice to see the Weeping Angels in this episode, but they're just fucking reduced to nothing again. And the Cybermen also, just for a second, just because why not? The Daleks are also seen in this episode, because let's throw that shit in there. The Daleks, the Weeping Angels, the Cybermen, Swarm and Azure, the passengers, all of this is thrown at you in this episode, and it's really not helpful at all. And we've already had the Sontarans thrown at us as well. Sontarans even, which is not fucking helpful at all. So I really wish you'd just fucking stop, okay? But we're getting to the next episode, Village of the Angels, which is one of my favourites, so yes, Village of the Angels up next. And yeah, up next, Village of the Angels. So, Village of the Angels, my favourite episode of Flux, I think. Not only because it has the awesome end credits music that you're hearing now, that's different to the normal one. Which is sick, but also because it introduces one of the better characters in this entire series, Eustachius Jericho. Professor Eustachius Jericho. Really good character, really funny. He works really well in this episode, and as it goes on, he becomes an extra character that we all get to know and love. And I think him and Carvanista are the two best additions that the series has given to the franchise, I personally believe. And it really helps, in my humble opinion, that they're played brilliantly by the actors who played them. Which is fantastic. And the episode itself is has a really great story with Peggy, and basically sharing two storylines as well, with Peggy, the child / adult, as we find out later on, and then Claire and Jericho. And also, obviously, having the Weeping Angels here is quite fun. And inevitably, the ending, interesting ending. I really like the ending of Village of the Angels, where she gets you are recalled, and the Doctor gets turned into a Weeping Angel. Really cool stuff. That's the kind of shit Flux should be about. Having fun, epic moments with some cool dialogue, and that's what this was. It wasn't introducing too many new characters. It only introduced one. We didn't see much of we did see Vinda, and we saw Belle as well a little bit, but it wasn't every 10 seconds. It was, I think, once in the episode where Belle went to the planet with the passenger and told the guy to not get on the passenger, and then that guy got upset, but then he realised that actually she'd saved her. And then at the very end of the episode, after the epic end credits, you hear you see another sequence where Vinda shows up near the guy that where the guy that Belle saved is. And that's all fun. Yeah, it's a genuinely really solid episode of this series. It is, I think, my favourite episode of Flux, personally. And it really does, the whole idea with the angel being trapped inside a human and slowly, coming out and stuff. That is a cool concept, and it works well here. And again, Second Econo's music here is fantastic. Not only, like I mentioned, the end credit sequence, but the actual music of the show, and of the episode is really well done as well. I like the pieces where at the very end where she gets recalled. That's really sick. Yeah, it's overall one of the best episodes of this series so far. Really, because you have a very little... it's almost a side tangent, but it's not at the same time. That's so good about it, because it focuses, for the most part, on one set of characters and one story, instead of trying to cram every single plotline that they've already established in only 4 episodes down your throat. You know, Swarm and Azure, the Division, Tecteun, the Passengers. You've also got the Sontarans, the Cybermen, and the Daleks. The Angels. You've also got the whole taking villages out of time. You've got Bel and Vinda. You know, there's so much that they've already put on the plate, and it's only 3-4 episodes in, and it really affected the last episode, as you heard. But it really means, for some reason, they thought, let's just wipe that slate clean for just 5 minutes. So basically, when they were making this episode, it was raining outside, and the rain was all the stupid stuff that, you know, was set up in the last episode. And for this episode, they just wiped it clean for just this episode. And then after this episode happened, they didn't wipe it clean again afterwards, really. And it gets really confusing as it goes on. But here, it's a solid episode. It really pushes stuff forward. It helps with the narrative as well by keeping it very almost historical, but also not at the same time, because not only do they go to 1967, they also go to 1901, and Dan and Yaz get stranded there. So it's nice to see Yaz feel a little bit unknown and uncertain, because usually she is in control and she knows what's going on and she knows what to do. But to see Yaz in a situation where she actually doesn't know what's going on and is very scared is an interesting one to see. So yeah. Up next is the very next episode, funnily enough. Survivors of the Flux. We only have 2 episodes left, which is amazing to think about that this review is nearly over. But yeah. 5 Survivors of the Flux. Right, so episode 5 Survivors of the Flux. Now, I mean, this episode is marginally better, but not by much. I mean, you have... basically, most of this episode is down to the Doctor going to Division and meeting up with Tecteun, who, if you don't know, Tecteun was, as told by the Master, the woman who found the Doctor all those years ago as a child, and took her back to the Time Lords, and obviously being the Time Child that the Doctor is, and that kind of that thing. So it brings back that from series 12, which confirms that yes, that is still a canonized thing. And then it's also the other part is Dan, Yaz, and Jericho in the 1900s. So it's a much more even split instead of jumping to Vinda and what's her face, which she does do at the end, but it doesn't jump there every 5 minutes like it does in the previous episodes. It just jumps there at the very end. Listen, it's actually a good episode, right? An episode I quite enjoy. I think does enough to continue the story in an interesting way. It brings the story to a point where it brings the whole thing to a level, in my opinion. It's also nice to see the Ood as well in this episode for a little bit. And yeah, it's an episode for me where Swarm and Azure only pop up at the very end, I believe, to where they kill Tecteun, so that's fun. And then they're about to game in the Doctor, and that's where the episode ends. Yeah, honestly, you spend most of the episode with Tecteun and the Doctor, and they just have a conversation, which is a nice break from the let's throw everything at the wall and stick for the second to last episode, funny enough. So, you know, again, this has been a really, really mixed series. That doesn't reflect well on anything really. So yeah, that has been my review of episode 5, Survivors of the Flux. Next up, we have the Vanquishers, the series finale, the final episode of the series. I cannot believe, we're this close to the end. And like I said at the beginning of this video, the 3 specials, Eve of the Daleks, Legend of the Speed Devils, Legend of the Sea Devils, and the Power of the Doctor will all be discussed on their own when A, the Power of the Doctor airs, and B, all 3 of them have their soundtracks released, which will be most likely a triple, like a combined album for the 3 of them. Like they did with the Series 4 specials, Series 13, the specials, the soundtrack will be. Hopefully, we can hope, but we can't guarantee. Yeah. On to the final episode of Doctor Who Flux, episode 6. The Vanquishers ? Yes, the Vanquishers. That's fun. So, episode 6, the final episode of Doctor Who Flux, being the Vanquishers. Now, again, like I mentioned at the very beginning of this video, by the time we reach this episode, there is so much on the plate. And this is the most fucked episode of the whole fucking television series, like, ever. Because there is so much to juggle. Yes! Dan, Carvanista, Vinder, Di, Jericho, Claire, the Sontarans, the Cybermen, the Daleks. The Weeping Angels come in at the very end. The Flux itself, Swarm and Azure, the Ood appear in this episode only. Obviously, Tectone's already dead. The fucking the Passengers play a part in this episode. Vinder and Bell again play a part in this episode, like I mentioned before. There's so much to pull apart. Then Kate Stewart turns up for fucking 5 minutes, which is, which is cool, but she's another person. There's a point where there's about 6, 7, 8, maybe 9 people in the TARDIS at one time. It's fucking crazy. And as a result of which, it really doesn't stick the landing, which is a shame, because Flux has proven itself to be, in terms of musical score, one of the best musical scores of the new era of Doctor, one of the best musical scores of the show's entire history. And actually has some really good visual effects for the most part, and some really, really good makeup on Swarm and Azure. Like, genuinely, that's something I haven't brought up yet, but the makeup on Swarm and Azure is fantastic. The costume as well for the Lupari and for Carvanista is fantastic as well. So that's really something that I can admire, that the props, the makeup, the costume design, all perfect, all brilliant. The sound design and the music is fantastic, but it's everything else around it that falls flat on its face and through the ground. And then obviously there's the bait ending where he goes, beware of the forces that mass against you and their master, which is obviously a setup for The Power of the Doctor, October 23rd, 2022 at 6 PM UK time. The final episode of the Jodie Whittaker era of the 13th Doctor, which will again be covered in another video for the specials and the specials alone, so that'll be fun. Yeah, Flux's landing didn't stick very well at all. It had so much to and then on top of all of that, there's the fucking Victorian man who was introduced in the first episode and then didn't go any further than that. There's that fucking house that was introduced in the first episode that comes back here briefly and hasn't appeared since or before in the show. So it's a really messy series of Doctor Who, but in its defense, being made at the time it was made, it had a hard job to still be good, and with this creative team, it already had a low chance of survival, and it didn't get past that period either. So Doctor Who Flux, as a whole, has some really positive moments to it. There's the stuff with Unit in the last episode. There is the Grand Serpent and Carvanista are really cool characters. The whole Lupari race is really sick. Dan is a really good character, I like him. Vinder's also really cool, and so is Bell for the most part, other than the fact that they take away from the story. It's cool to see the Sontarans and Cybermen and the Daleks back, although be it for the Daleks and the Cybermen, it's about 5 minutes, not even that, about 30 seconds. Swarm and Azure are interesting villains. They're not the worst in the show's history, and I think, like I said, the makeup and the writing for at least Swarm, maybe not so much Azure, she doesn't do as much as Swarm does, but the writing for Swarm is fantastic, I think, here. Eustace Jericho is one of the best characters in a Doctor Who show, in this entire show, period, and I love him for it. The dynamic between Yaz and the Doctor isn't further explored here, isn't really further explored until the next episode, Eve of the Daleks. But Doctor Who Flux was a fun event to experience. It was great to be there each and every week for an episode of Doctor Who. I can't wait to relive that again when it comes to the new series and stuff, Russell T Davies stuff. But it was nice to be there, and I can, this is the only year of the show so far that I've been able to say that I've been there since the very first episode aired, all the way back in 2018, all the way through to the 13th Doctor's final episode, The Power of the Doctor, at the end of this month. It's been a wild run. I'll reflect more on this obviously in the episode in the video where I talk about the 3 specials, but for Flux and for the previous 2 series of Doctor Who and their related specials, Resolution and Revolution of the Daleks, there have been some high highs and low lows of Doctor Who, and I will admit they've made the production value skyrocket, and I can't wait to see what Russell T Davies does with the same budget. And it's been a pleasure to have Jodie Whittaker be the Doctor. I have experienced the entire year of. While I have some very personal affections towards Mr. Peter Capaldi over here, and Matt Smith is my favourite Doctor, I think Jodie's one of the best Doctors, and she has always tried her best, considering she's not been given the best writing. It's not been her fault that this era has been bad. It's not her fault. She's not a bad actress. She does the best of what she's given. She's so lively, she's so energetic, but she can also have that darker side to her. But I think she also isn't completely in control of herself a lot of the time, and that's a vulnerability that hasn't been explored in previous Doctors. And while it wasn't explored the best here, it was very much explored in Flux, and only in Flux. Control has been I think, at least in Flux, a big theme of her progression through this series. But I enjoyed Flux for what it is. And I thank you for joining me on this journey through Doctor Who Flux. So thank you so much for watching this review of Doctor Who Flux, the 13th series of Doctor Who. Again, the specials video will be coming very soon. And I've got more reviews coming soon. I'm trying to get them out as much as possible. Yeah, thanks so much for watching. Have a wonderful day. And the future is bright for Doctor Who.